Do you ever wonder how far someone would go to ruin your life? I didn't. Not until the day my brother, my so-called family, framed me for something that shattered everything I'd built. The pounding on the door was deafening, each bang vibrating through my chest like a countdown to destruction. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, but the yelling on the other side left no doubt. They weren't leaving without answers. My wife, Emily, stood frozen in the living room, our 2 young daughters clinging to her legs, their wide eyes reflecting the fear we all felt. "Daniel James," my father's voice boomed, carrying the kind of fury I hadn't heard since childhood. "Open this damn door right now!" I opened it. There stood my parents, my brother Michael trailing behind them, his expression twisted with barely concealed satisfaction. My father shoved a crumpled piece of paper into my chest. "You have the audacity to call yourself part of this family after what you've done?" he spat. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a printed screenshot, a message thread between a woman named Amanda and me. The words were vile, the kind of things no man should say to a woman. My heart raced. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a setup. And the worst part, my family believed it. "Who is Amanda?" I stammered, looking from one accusing face to another. "Don't play dumb," Michael sneered. "You followed her to her car after a party. You know what you did." Emily's voice trembled. "Dan, please tell me this isn't true." Her eyes, usually so full of love and trust, were now brimming with doubt. My chest tightened as I stepped toward her. "It's not true. I swear to you," I pleaded. But the words felt hollow against the tidal wave of judgment crashing over me. My father's patience snapped. "Enough!" he roared. "We've already spoken to Amanda. She has screenshots, Daniel. You threatened her to keep quiet." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My brother stood silently, his smirk growing. He'd always been the favorite, the golden child, but I never thought he'd sink this low. "Not until that moment. I didn't send those messages," I shouted, finally finding my voice. "This is a setup. You have to believe me." But no one did. My father's hand struck my face, a sharp sting that echoed through the room. "Get out of my sight," he hissed. Emily grabbed our daughters and rushed to the car, her sobs breaking through my desperate apologies. By nightfall, she was gone. My father, in an act of finality, tossed me a box of my belongings from their attic. "You're dead to us," he said coldly. Michael stood behind them, watching it all unfold. His victory was clear in the gleam of his eyes. That night, I sat alone in our darkened apartment, staring at the text thread. The photos, the words, they were all fake, but they were meticulously crafted to ruin me, and they had succeeded. Looking back, it seems impossible to pinpoint the moment everything began to unravel. Maybe it was always there, simmering under the surface, a quiet rivalry fed by years of favoritism. Michael was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He wasn't malicious, at least not outwardly. Growing up, I admired his confidence, his ease with people. He was the star of every family gathering, the one my parents doted on endlessly. When he struggled in school, they got him tutors. When he failed in business, they financed his hardware store. Meanwhile, I was the afterthought, the shadow. My successes were met with polite nods, my struggles ignored, but I had my own victories. I married Emily, the love of my life, and together we built a future that didn't rely on my family's approval. We bought a modest home, had 2 beautiful daughters, and found happiness in each other. Still, I made an effort to keep the peace, to visit for holidays and birthdays, even when Michael's smugness grated on my nerves. Things took a darker turn when Michael started showing up at our house, uninvited. At first, it was harmless. He'd drop by for a beer or to borrow tools, but soon it became intrusive. He'd linger late into the evening, monopolizing Emily's attention with stories that bordered on flirtation. I brushed it off, not wanting to make waves. Then, one night, I caught him staring at Emily in a way that made my skin crawl. When I confronted him, he laughed it off, calling me paranoid. But the way he avoided my gaze said otherwise. I told Emily about my concerns, and she promised to set boundaries. Yet, Michael's visits continued, and his presence loomed like a storm cloud over our lives. That summer, we hosted a barbecue for Emily's birthday. It was meant to be a simple celebration, but Michael turned it into a spectacle. He brought expensive wine, lavish gifts for the kids, and a charm that won over everyone but me. As the night wore on, his remarks became bolder, his laughter too loud, and his glances at Emily lingering too long. When the party ended and the guests had gone, Emily pulled me aside. "You need to talk to him," she said, her voice firm. "He's crossing lines, Dan. It's making me uncomfortable." The next day, I did. I told Michael he needed to back off, to stop inserting himself into our lives. His reaction was unexpected. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. Instead, he smirked and said, "Don't worry, little brother. I know my place." I should have known then that he had something planned. As I sat in the wreckage of my life, the pieces began to fit together. Michael's growing resentment, his obsession with Emily, his access to my family. It wasn't just an accident or misunderstanding. It was deliberate. And I knew, deep down, that I had to fight back, because this wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about reclaiming everything Michael had stolen from me, my family, my reputation, my life, and I wasn't going to let him win. The days following my family's betrayal were a blur of anger, confusion, and desperation. I was barely eating, barely sleeping, and replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. My brother Michael's smug face haunted me. He had set this trap, woven this web of lies, and now I was caught in it with no way out. The worst part wasn't even my parents' swift condemnation or Emily's tearful exit. It was the silence that followed. No calls, no messages, just a vacuum where my family had been. My world had gone from stable to shambles in less than 24 hours, and I had no idea how to fix it. I spent the first week trying to gather evidence, desperate to prove my innocence. I scoured my phone, my emails, and my social media for any trace of the alleged conversation with Amanda. There was nothing. Not a single message, no missed calls, no evidence that I'd ever interacted with her in years. It was infuriating, but it also confirmed what I already knew. This was a calculated attack. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the fallout at work. Rumors had spread like wildfire. People I'd worked with for years now avoided eye contact, their whispered conversations halting whenever I entered the room. My supervisor called me in for a friendly chat that was anything but. "You need to step away," he said, his tone clipped. "This situation is bad for morale." "What situation?" I shot back. "You know I didn't do this." He sighed heavily, his gaze flicking to the floor. "It doesn't matter if you did or didn't. Perception is everything." I knew what he was really saying. They wanted me gone before things got messier. I was expendable. That realization stung almost as much as my family's betrayal. As I sat in my empty apartment, trying to figure out my next move, a text from an old college friend lit up my phone. It was a screenshot of a WhatsApp group chat, our extended families group. My stomach twisted as I saw my name plastered across the messages. Michael had been busy. "Did you see what Dan did?" one cousin had written. Michael replied, "Yeah, it's disgusting. Honestly, we should have seen this coming." Another message read, "He always was a bit off." Makes sense now. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My own brother was fanning the flames, turning even distant relatives against me. He wasn't just content with ruining my marriage and my relationship with our parents. He was systematically dismantling my entire support system. But why? What was the point of all this? Jealousy, spite, or something darker? 2 weeks after the fallout, I got an unexpected message from Laura, Michael's ex-wife. She and I had never been close, but we'd exchanged polite words at family gatherings. Her text was blunt. "Can we meet? It's about Michael." Curiosity and desperation drove me to agree. We met at a quiet coffee shop, and Laura looked nervous as she slid into the seat across from me. Her hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. "I heard what happened," she began cautiously. "And I believe you." My breath hitched. "Why?" She glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers before lowering her voice. "Because I know Michael. He did the same thing to me." My blood ran cold. She proceeded to tell me how, during their marriage, Michael had manipulated situations to isolate her from her friends and family. He'd spread rumors, forged emails, and even planted evidence to make her seem unhinged when she tried to leave him. "I never thought he'd go this far," she admitted, her voice heavy with regret. "But I'm not surprised. He's always been obsessed with control and—" She hesitated, her eyes darting to the table. "And what?" I pressed. "And Emily," she whispered. Laura's words hit me like a freight train. "He's obsessed with Emily. He always has been. Even when we were married, he'd talk about her, how beautiful she was, how you didn't deserve her." My fists clenched under the table. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they painted was horrifying. Michael's visits to our house, his lingering looks, his inappropriate comments, it had all been leading to this. Laura leaned forward, her voice urgent. "You need to be careful. Michael doesn't stop until he gets what he wants." I nodded, though my mind was racing. Emily had left me, my family had disowned me, and Michael had orchestrated it all. But why? Was it just about her, or was this some twisted power play? 2 days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Michael. His smug grin made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm as I let him in. He sat on my couch like he owned the place, his eyes scanning the bare walls and empty shelves. "Nice setup," he remarked sarcastically. "Guess it's a step up from prison, huh?" I didn't take the bait. "What do you want, Michael?" He leaned back, his grin widening. "Just wanted to see how you were holding up. Thought maybe you'd need some brotherly advice." I clenched my jaw. "Cut the crap. Why are you really here?" His expression darkened, the mask slipping for just a moment. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you, Dan. It's about me. It's always been about me." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "What the hell are you talking about?" He stood, towering over me, his voice dripping with venom. "You were always the problem. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and you still managed to screw it up. Emily deserved better." She deserved me. The room spun as his words sank in. He wasn't just trying to ruin my life. He wanted to take it. My family, my reputation, my wife, everything. I stood, my fists clenched. "Get out!" Michael laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You can't stop me. You never could. But hey, good luck trying." As the door slammed behind him, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. Michael's visit left me shaken, but not defeated. His words echoed in my head, a vile confirmation of everything I'd feared. This wasn't just about petty jealousy or sibling rivalry. Michael had orchestrated my downfall, and he was reveling in it. But why? What drove him to dismantle my life so methodically? I needed answers. I needed proof, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. A week after Michael's confrontation, I got a call from Laura, his ex-wife. Her voice was urgent, almost frantic. "Dan," she began, "I've been thinking about what I told you. There's more you need to know." My heart sank. "More? What do you mean? Michael, he's dangerous," she said, her voice trembling. "After we talked, I started going through some old things, emails, messages, receipts, and I found something you need to see." "Laura, just tell me," I urged. "I think he's been planning this for years," she whispered. "And it's worse than you think." Laura met me at a small diner the next day, her hands clutching a manila envelope, as though it contained state secrets. She slid it across the table, her expression grim. "Everything's in there," she said quietly. "Emails, screenshots, even some journal entries he kept. He wrote about Emily." I stared at the envelope, my hands suddenly clammy. "What does it say?" Her eyes darted away. "He's obsessed with her, Dan. He wrote about how she was the perfect woman, and how you didn't deserve her. There's even a section where he talks about fixing things between you two. I think that's when he started planning the whole Amanda thing." My stomach churned. I opened the envelope and began skimming through its contents. Sure enough, there were emails between Michael and Amanda, discussing the fabricated accusations and how to make them stick. One message even included instructions on creating fake screenshots of messages between Amanda and me. "This is insane," I muttered, my voice shaking. "He did all this just to ruin my life? For what?" Laura reached across the table, her expression pained. "Because he's broken, Danny. He's always been broken. But you need to stop him before he does something worse." Armed with Laura's evidence, I decided to confront Amanda directly. I tracked her down through social media and sent her a message, asking to meet. To my surprise, she agreed. We met in a quiet park, away from prying eyes. Amanda looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. I don't have much time, she said quickly. What do you want? I know what you and Michael did, I said bluntly. I have proof. Her face went pale, and she took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap, Amanda, I snapped, pulling out a printout of one of the emails. This is your name, your email address. You helped him set me up, didn't you? She stared at the paper, her facade crumbling. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sank onto a nearby bench. I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. Michael said it was just a prank. He promised no one would get hurt. No one would get hurt, I repeated, my voice rising. You destroyed my life. My marriage, my career, my family, everything is gone because of you two. Amanda sobbed into her hands. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know he'd take it this far. He told me you'd cheated on Emily, that you deserved it. I believed him. Her words stung, but they also revealed the depth of Michael's manipulation. He hadn't just turned my family against me. He'd created an entire narrative, one where he was the hero and I was the villain. Amanda's confession was the final straw. I recorded her admission, ensuring I had concrete evidence of Michael's betrayal. But as I walked away from that park, a new question gnawed at me. What else was he hiding? I hired a private investigator, someone who could dig deeper into Michael's life. The results were shocking. Not only had Michael fabricated the allegations against me, but he'd also been embezzling money from our parents' retirement fund. He'd drained tens of thousands of dollars to support his lavish lifestyle. New cars, expensive vacations, and even a failed attempt to start a landscaping business. The PI also uncovered that Michael had been sending anonymous messages to Emily, pretending to be me. He'd painted himself as the supportive brother, all while poisoning her against me. Fueled by anger and armed with evidence, I decided it was time to confront Michael once and for all. I called a family meeting at my parents' house, insisting that everyone be present. My parents, Emily, and even some extended relatives. They all showed up, curious and concerned. Michael arrived last, his trademark smirk plastered across his face. "What's this about, Dan?" he asked mockingly. "Finally ready to apologize?" "Not quite," I replied, pulling out the stack of evidence. "But I think you owe everyone here an explanation." The room fell silent as I laid everything out. The emails, the financial records, Amanda's confession. Gasps filled the room as the truth unraveled, and Michael's smirk slowly faded. "Is this true?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "Michael, did you really do all this?" he stammered, his usual confidence gone. "Mom, it's not what it looks like." "Enough!" my father roared, slamming his hand on the table. "You've disgraced this family." Michael's eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, but there were none. Emily was in tears, my mother was shaking, and the rest of the family stared at him in disgust. "You ruined my life," I said, my voice steady but cold. "And for what? Jealousy? Obsession? You're a pathetic excuse for a brother." Michael lunged toward me, but my father stepped in, holding him back. "Get out," he ordered. "You're not welcome here anymore." As Michael stormed out, the room remained silent. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of vindication. The truth was out, and Michael's reign of terror was over. But this was only the beginning. I still had to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. And while the scars of Michael's betrayal would never fully heal, I knew one thing for sure. I was done being his victim. The fallout from the family confrontation was seismic. Michael had fled the house in disgrace, leaving behind a room full of people grappling with the magnitude of his deceit. But as the dust began to settle, I realized this wasn't just about exposing Michael. It was about reclaiming my life. The days following the confrontation were a blur of phone calls and emotional breakdowns. My mother oscillated between denial and heartbreak, struggling to reconcile the truth about her golden child. My father, stoic as always, seemed more angry at himself than anyone else. And Emily, she avoided me entirely. I was left with a strange mixture of vindication and emptiness. The truth was out, but what now? Could I ever repair the relationships that Michael had so thoroughly poisoned? Did I even want to? It was nearly a week later when Emily showed up at my door. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I could handle another emotional blow. But when I saw her standing there, her face streaked with tears, I knew this was different. "Dan," she began, her voice shaking. "I don't even know where to start." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "How about an explanation?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "I was blind. I believed Michael because I wanted to. He was there when everything fell apart. He convinced me that you were the problem, and I let him." Her words were like salt in a wound. "Do you have any idea what that cost me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You didn't even give me a chance to defend myself." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." We talked for hours, piecing together the wreckage of the past few years. Emily admitted that her relationship with Michael had been toxic from the start, built on manipulation and lies. She told me how he had isolated her from her friends and family, using her guilt over the divorce as leverage. And now, with his deceit laid bare, she was finally ready to leave him. Emily's confession was cathartic, but it wasn't enough. I needed more than words. I needed action. With her help, I began compiling a case against Michael. I wasn't just going to let him slink away into the shadows. He had to face the consequences of his actions. The first step was legal. I met with my lawyer, armed with the evidence Laura and Amanda had provided. Together, we built a defamation case so airtight that even Michael's slippery tactics couldn't wriggle out of it. But I didn't stop there. I also filed a report with the authorities about his embezzlement from our parents' accounts. It felt like justice was finally within reach. Predictably, Michael didn't take kindly to being cornered. Within days of receiving the legal notice, he began his counterattack. He spread rumors among our extended family, painting me as a vindictive liar out for revenge. He even tried to guilt-trip our parents, claiming I was tearing the family apart, but this time, no one was buying it. The evidence was too damning, the lies too blatant. His golden child status had been irrevocably tarnished. Still, his efforts weren't without impact. My mother begged me to drop the charges, pleading for family unity. My father, while more subdued, expressed concerns about the toll this would take on everyone involved. "What about the toll it's already taken on me?" I shot back. "He ruined my life. He deserves to pay for that." They couldn't argue with that. The day of the hearing was nerve-wracking. Michael, ever the showman, arrived with an air of defiance. He denied everything, of course, spinning elaborate tales of misunderstanding and misplaced blame. But as the evidence was presented, emails, bank statements, Amanda's testimony, it became clear that he was cornered. When the verdict was delivered, I felt a wave of relief. The court found in my favor, awarding damages for defamation and ordering Michael to repay the embezzled funds. It wasn't about the money. It was about vindication. For the first time in years, I felt like I had won. After the court case, I made a decision. I was done with Michael. No more attempts at reconciliation. No more second chances. I blocked his number, unfriended him on social media, and told my parents in no uncertain terms that he was no longer a part of my life. They didn't take it well. My mother cried. My father scowled. But I stood firm. "I need to move on," I told them. "And I can't do that with him in my life." To my surprise, Emily supported me. She had filed for divorce from Michael, taking their daughter with her. It was a messy process, but she seemed determined to break free from his toxic influence. With Michael out of the picture, I finally had the space to rebuild. I focused on my career, throwing myself into new projects and reconnecting with old colleagues. I started therapy, working through the trauma and guilt that had haunted me for years, and slowly but surely, I began to heal. But the most important change was in my relationships. I reconnected with my daughters, spending weekends with them and rebuilding the bond we had lost. It wasn't easy. They were wary at first, unsure of who I was after so many years apart. But with time and patience, they began to trust me again. And then there was Emily. Our relationship would never be the same, but we found a way to co-parent effectively. For the first time in years, we were on the same team. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. Michael's betrayal was devastating, but it also forced me to confront the flaws in my family dynamic and take control of my own life. I learned to set boundaries, to value myself, and to fight for what I deserved. Michael may have tried to destroy me, but in the end, he only made me stronger. The dust had settled. For the first time in years, My life wasn't clouded by the constant turmoil of my family's manipulation and betrayal. There was a quietness to my days that felt foreign at first, like standing in the eye of a storm, waiting for the winds to pick up again. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized this wasn't temporary. This was peace. After the court case, I took steps to reconnect with my daughters. Olivia and Chloe were hesitant at first. They had spent years seeing me through Michael's lens, believing his lies about me. But I knew that building trust would take time. I started small, attending their soccer games, helping with school projects, and being present in ways I hadn't been allowed to before. During one of our outings, Olivia hesitated before asking, "Dad, why did Uncle Michael say those things about you?" Her question hit me like a punch, but I stayed calm. "Sometimes people hurt others to make themselves feel better," I explained. "But that doesn't mean it was right. What matters is that we're here now, starting fresh." Chloe nodded solemnly, and I could see the wheels turning in her young mind. They were beginning to understand. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but every smile, every hug, and every shared laugh felt like a small victory. Emily, too, was navigating her own path to redemption. She had filed for divorce from Michael and was slowly untangling herself from the mess he had created. Though our relationship would never return to what it was, we found a new rhythm as co-parents. One evening, after dropping off the girls, she lingered at the door. "Dan," she said quietly, "I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know I'm proud of the father you've become." Her words were unexpected, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," I finally said. "I'm just trying to do what's right for them." She nodded, a faint smile crossing her face. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. As for Michael, karma didn't wait long to collect its debt. After losing the defamation case, he was left financially devastated. His business, already struggling, collapsed entirely. Word of his lies and manipulations spread quickly, alienating him from the extended family and his few remaining friends. In one final, desperate act, he called me. His voice was a mix of anger and desperation as he begged for help. "You've made your point, Dan," he said, "but we're still family. You can't just leave me like this." I took a deep breath, the years of pain and betrayal flashing before my eyes. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Don't call me again." I hung up, and for the first time, I felt no guilt, no regret, just relief. With the chaos behind me, I turned my focus to my own happiness. I poured myself into my work, finding fulfillment in building something of my own. I also began to explore hobbies I had abandoned long ago: photography, hiking, even cooking. It was like rediscovering pieces of myself that had been buried under years of family drama. And then there was Kim. She had been my rock through it all, her unwavering support, a constant reminder that I didn't have to face life alone. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt a surge of emotions: joy, fear, hope, but most of all, gratitude. This was my chance to do things right, to build a family grounded in love and trust. As we prepared for the arrival of our child, Kim encouraged me to reflect on my journey. "You've been through hell," she said one night, her hand resting on her growing belly. "But look at you now. You're stronger than ever." Despite cutting ties, my parents reached out, asking for a meeting. They wanted to apologize, to mend what had been broken. I agreed, not out of a desire for reconciliation, but for closure. When I walked into their home, the weight of the past hit me like a wave. My mother's eyes were red from crying, and my father looked older, wearier. "We were wrong," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We let Michael blind us to the truth. Can you ever forgive us?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around the room, taking in the remnants of a life I had fought so hard to leave behind. "I don't know if forgiveness is possible," I said finally, "but I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same." They nodded, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't the emotional reunion they had hoped for, but it was honest, and that was enough for me. The birth of my son marked the start of a new chapter. Holding him for the first time, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't known was possible. Here was a new life, untouched by the pain of the past, a blank slate. I thought about the lessons I wanted to teach him, the kind of father I wanted to be. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I also knew I was ready to face them. Looking back, it's clear that Michael's betrayal was a turning point, not just in my relationships, but in my understanding of myself. I had spent years trying to please others, sacrificing my own happiness in the process. But in losing everything, I found the strength to rebuild on my own terms. This journey wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about reclaiming my life. And as I held my son, with Kim by my side and my daughters laughing in the next room, I realized I had done just that. For the first time in years, I was free. Life has a way of moving forward, no matter how tangled and broken the past may seem. As I sit here writing this, with my newborn son asleep in his crib and Kim humming softly in the kitchen, I can't help but marvel at how far I've come. The years of heartache and betrayal could have left me bitter, but instead, they became the foundation for something stronger. With Kim's unwavering support, I learned to let go of the anger that once consumed me. She reminded me, time and again, that I wasn't defined by what I had endured, but by how I chose to rise above it. My daughters, Olivia and Chloe, have become a central part of my life. While our relationship is still healing, the progress we've made is undeniable. Olivia recently asked if I could help her with a school project, a small but significant step in rebuilding trust. Chloe has started calling me Dad again, a word I never thought I'd hear from her lips. These moments, though seemingly small, are monumental to me. Emily has respected the boundaries I've set, focusing instead on co-parenting in a way that prioritizes the girl's well-being. She's even shown gratitude for Kim's influence, admitting that her presence has been a calming force in the storm of our shared history. As for Michael, his absence has been a gift. The last I heard, he's struggling to rebuild his life after losing both his marriage and the support of the family. It's not a fate I wish on anyone, but I've learned that people must face the consequences of their actions. I no longer feel responsible for his downfall, nor do I carry the weight of his choices. The biggest takeaway from this journey has been the importance of self-respect. For years, I allowed myself to be the scapegoat, the one who bent over backward for others while receiving little in return. Now, I understand the power of setting boundaries, not out of spite, but out of a deep sense of self-worth. I've also come to appreciate the value of forgiveness, not necessarily for others, but for myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing the pain or forgetting the betrayal. It means refusing to let those experiences define my future. It means finding peace in the face of chaos and choosing to move forward with grace. Kim and I have plans to move to a larger house soon, one that can accommodate our growing family. The thought of a fresh start fills me with hope. I envision a home filled with laughter and warmth, a place where my children can feel safe and loved, a stark contrast to the environment I grew up in. My son will never know the pain of betrayal or the weight of familial dysfunction. He'll grow up with parents who love and respect each other, who model healthy relationships and teach him to value himself and others. This chapter of my life is closing, not with a triumphant shout, but with a quiet, steady sense of fulfillment. I've faced my demons, confronted my past, and emerged stronger on the other side. The scars remain, but they're no longer wounds. They're reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. To anyone reading this, who feels trapped by the weight of their own family's expectations or betrayal, know this: you are not alone. You have the power to reclaim your life, to rewrite your story, and to find happiness on your own terms. It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it is possible. As I hold my son close and watch my daughters playing in the yard, I know one thing for certain: the pain of the past no longer holds power over me. This is my life now, and it's one I've fought hard to build. For the first time, I can truly say I am free.